Okay, I'm back. I know that didn't seem very long to you, but it was actually 24 hours here. I, I can only go on talking here so long before I just feel kind of dumb. But I'm moving, transitioning to the other part of this now, and I should have probably split these up, but I wanted to get them both out there because I think that the poetry world and the small press world has been hit by a barrage of bad news. It isn't just one thing. It isn't just one area where all of a sudden we are in a bad place. It's being hit in a number of different areas where all of a sudden somebody like me, who's been writing poetry for 30 years and has reached maybe the summit of the ability, the I guess you would call it a profession. It's not really a profession, a avocation maybe, with work in Best American Poetry and in national journals and across the board in lots of journals. I'm thinking about giving it up. I'm thinking about it's not worth it anymore. I'm thinking that this art has been so overrun by bullshit that it isn't worth it to me anymore. I don't make enough money from it. I probably make maybe $1,000 a year on a good year from poetry. That's probably roughly, I probably make about as much as I put out. I probably break even. Even though I just sold a couple of poems to Rattle, and that's a couple $100, and I sold another Ekphrasius poem to Rattle. I sold a couple of those this year, so those are a couple another $50, and I can talk about other places in which I've earned money from the poetry. Even still, it costs money for stamps. It costs money to for printer ribbon. It costs money for envelopes. It costs money to have an internet connection to send the work out. It costs money to do what I'm doing here. This very program in which I'm doing this on costs money. Everything, the microphone that I'm using to record this costs money. The everything that you see and hear that I do costs money, and I can't get one Patreon supporter, not even for $1 a month, not even something that would, for a cup of coffee a month for somebody. Can't even get that. That's basically, that's after 30 years of working at it. And so I'm not complaining about this. I love poetry. I've been doing it for basically for free for a long time. I get it. It's not a widely beloved art, although I love it. But I get that but when you're going to throw all the bullshit into it, then it suddenly stops to become worth it. When you have a great art and you love it and you're doing it well, and all you're asking for really is that people appreciate it and not give you shit about it and not say horrible things about you and not put other people ahead of you that don't deserve to be ahead of you, just because they're famous or just because they're female or just because they're another race. When you do that kind of stuff, then it becomes extremely. I become less interested in doing it. And let me tell you something: poetry can't afford to lose me. It can't. It can't. That's not a vain statement. It's the same thing. Hillary Clinton couldn't afford to lose me either. That's why she lost the election. She couldn't afford it. But she didn't care. She went on TV and said that everything that I believe about, a constitutional republic is just racism. And so if you're going to go down that road and you're going to lose somebody like me, you're going to lose the whole art. The art cannot be sustained by a bunch of assholes. It just can't. It needs its talented poets. And if you squeeze out its most talented people who are willing to sacrifice to the extent that I've sacrificed for poetry, man oh man, you are not going to last very long as an art that has any function in the culture at all. Nothing. You're just going to be a megaphone for the progressive agenda, and A megaphone's the wrong word. It'd be a microphone. And when I mean micro, I mean small. I mean nobody's listening to it. Nobody. Nobody at all. Nobody gives a crap about it at all. A few academics and a few more and more insular academic institutions, and that's it. The art absolutely needs people who disagree with the monolithic culture that the arts have become, especially poetry. And so that brings me to Professor Randa Jarrar. Randa Jarrar is a professor of, I guess, creative writing and English at California State University, Fresno, or Fresno State University. Again, that's the place where William Saroyan, lived. So it has a great literary history and tradition. And well, let me give you some backstory before we get to Miss Jarrar. And let's talk about a poem that appeared in The Nation. Now, on July 24th of this year, so we're not talking that long ago, not even 2 weeks ago, The Nation published a poem that some people found offensive. Now, I don't think it's overly offensive. I just think it's bad. It's not a good poem. It tries to use a Ebonics type of slang. The guy's pasty white who wrote it. So obviously, right there, you're gonna have the race baiters come out right away and say the guy's writing him in blackface. You got all that garbage going on. But then you also have some people felt that the poems themselves, the poem itself, was ableist, which is a very interesting kind of PC garbage thing, where all of a sudden anybody who has any kind of disability whatever now can be a victim. So you used to have to be black, or you used to have to be female, or you used to have to be something, gay. And that pretty much covered, 60% of the population? Something like that. But now they found a way to get it to be 100%, or at least 97%. Because anybody who has any kind of infirmary at all, if your back hurts, if you're fat, I'm fat, by the way. If you're, so I would qualify. If you're, ugly, if you're stupid, it doesn't matter what the infirmary is. It doesn't matter what it is that does not allow you to achieve optimal success in this country. If you're not Donald Trump, or one of Donald Trump's children, and you're not walking around going from, mansion to mansion, you are disabled in some way. And then if somebody, writes a poem that says something that's negative, or treats fat people in a negative way, or stereotypes people in a negative way, then all of a sudden you can cry about this. You can say it's ableist. And now everybody, or, ageist, or they just pretty soon they're going to come up with just humanist. Actually, humanist is a thing, but you're gonna be like personist, They said something bad about a person, and I'm a person, so therefore I'm offended. Ultimately, it's the straitjacket of art. You cannot create art if everything is going to offend everybody. And even if, or let's put it this way, if you offend somebody, that has to be the death of that art and that artist and that publication that produces that art. Okay, so this poem, which I will read to you a little bit of, I don't even know that it's short too. It's as garbage as the other ones I read you. It's just not a good poem. But as far as what it says, it doesn't bother me. I'm not really entirely sure what his point is, but let me read it to you. The poem was called, where's the title for this thing? Geez, I don't even know. Oh, How To. If you got HIV, say AIDS. If you a girl, say you're pregnant. Nobody gonna lower themselves to listen to it for her kick. For the kick. People passing fast, splay your legs, cock a knee funny. It's the lamest, littlest shames they're likely to comprehend. Don't say homeless. They know you is. What they don't know is what opens a wallet, what stops them from counting what they drop. If you say young, say younger. Old, say older. If you're crippled, don't flaunt it. Let them think they're good enough Christians to notice. Don't say you pray, say you sin. It's about who they believe they is. You hardly even there. So I guess what he's trying to say in this poem, and I read you the whole poem, it's out there, it's online, and that's the poem. It's not, and I'll put links in the description for all this stuff so that you can go and check this stuff out for yourself. What you're seeing here is, what's he saying? I don't know. Maybe that, that you want to be subtle in your in the way that you shame people to get stuff. I guess that's what he's saying. I could be wrong. That's what I read into it. Do I find it offensive to like the homeless or to people who are old or to people who are crippled? No, not really. Not hardly at all. Not at all. I mean, the dialect itself is kind of off-putting and doesn't really fit the material. I don't know why you need to put it there. I think part of what he was doing was trying to appear to be a person who is not white, and because he knows, this is the funny thing about PC culture, he knows that if people just read the name, and his name is I want to get this right, it's a 3-liner. It's one of those 3-word poets. Good God Almighty. Yeah, there it is. Anders Carlson-Wee. So you can see how that might be construed as ethnic. And ethnic sells in the poetry world because there's hardly any color in the poetry world. They will lie to you and say there's all this diversity. There isn't. It's completely a white kind of art. And there's a reason for that. You have to have money to do it. I know, because I tried to do it without money and I ended up homeless. You need to have money to go into poetry. But poetry is one of those things that doesn't pay. And if you have talent, you go into something that pays. You go into something like writing mystery novels or something like that. If you have half a brain in your head, that's what you do. And so most of the people who write poetry are white in some degree, and usually white female. And they write this stuff because they are not under economic distress. Whereas minorities are usually not quote unquote privileged enough to do that. And so what we have is a guy who's basically trying to appear ethnic, writing crappy poetry, and he's got a book with Norton, so it's not like this guy has ridden this success pretty high. But now you have, so the Nation published him. Now I don't know if maybe the Nation thought that he would have the protection of being a black author or being an ethnic author, and therefore that would make them safe regardless of what it says. And then they got duped in the same way that Sherman Alexie got duped when he published a fake Asian American writer. He wasn't really Asian. He was a white guy pretending to be Asian. And then Sherman Alexie went on top of it and started saying that he publishes ethnic writers just for the point of it, and which is just flat out racist. But if that's the case, then you really ought to apologize for that. But what we instead, what we got was two of the most ridiculous, groveling apologies from because of this Twitter mob you'll ever find. And I'm going to read you the one first from the the nation that the editors stuck on this poem, right? And then I'm going to read you the apologies from Anders Wee, whatever his name is. God, it's not even worth knowing. The poetry is so bad. But you have Anders Carlson-Wee. Carlson-Wee. Good God, his name. Anyway, so I'm going to read you first their groveling apology and then his groveling apology. Okay, The Nation writes, on July 24, 2018, The Nation and its poetry editors, Stephanie Burt and Carmen Jimenez Smith, made the statement about the poem below, which contains disparaging and ableist language that has given offense and caused harm to members of several communities. Now notice how it's just a fact now. It's just a fact that it contains disparaging and ableist language. That's it. They just, the Twitter mob and the mob out there decided that that this was disparaging and ableist language, whatever that means, and now it's a fact. It's out there. They made the accusation, and therefore the accusation is true, regardless of whether it is or isn't true. And there's no trial on this. Nobody convenes a jury to see if this is accurate. They just decided it, and now you have to go along with that. You have to accept. You have to accept that this guy wasn't just writing in a persona, which writers have been doing forever, and that his statement was it was intentionally meant to attack all the people that he is talking about in the poem. Now, I don't see it. If you a girl, say you're pregnant, does that mean he hates pregnant women and he's mocking pregnant women? It's absurd. But anyway, this is their groveling apology. As poetry editors, we hold ourselves responsible for the ways in which the work we select is received. Now I'm going to stop. Wait. No, I'm going to read it right through, and then I'll get to it later. Let me start over, and I'll just take this line by line once we get done. As poetry editors, we hold ourselves responsible for the ways in which the work we select is received. We made a serious mistake by choosing to publish the poem How To. We are sorry for the pain we have caused to the many communities affected by this poem. We recognize that we must now earn your trust back. Some of our readers have asked what we were thinking. When we read the poem, we took it as a profane, over-the-top attack on the ways in which members of many groups are asked or required to perform the work of marginalization. We can no longer read the poem in that way. We are currently revising our process for solicited and unsolicited submissions. But more importantly, we are listening and we are working. We are grateful for the insightful critiques we have heard. But we know that the onus of change is on us, and we take that responsibility seriously. In the end, this decision means that we need to step back and look at not only our editing process, but at ourselves as editors. Okay. Now, oh my God, there's so much wrong with that. There is so much wrong with that. It's unbelievable. You can fisk this thing like crazy, and I'm going to do it a little bit, but I would keep you here all day. I could go line by line telling you why this is awful. Every single line in this is awful. Every single line in this is fucked up. Every last line in this is brutally awful for my art poetry. Every single one of them. It sucks. It sucks right down to the marrow. There's nothing good about it. Let's go with the first line. As poetry editors, we hold ourselves responsible for the ways in which the work we select is received. How in God's frickin' name can you hold yourself responsible for somebody else's emotions? Anybody can have any kind of reaction to any poem at any time. And no matter how crazy it is, you're responsible for that crazy reaction. Think about how absurd that is. Think about how absurd it is if I go and I say hello to you and you go, "Oh my God! Oh, why? Oh, it's the worst. Oh, you suck. Oh, my heart. I need to lay down for 10 hours. Oh, I'm getting a divorce." Could you imagine? And you sit there and you say, well, all I said was hello. You are somehow responsible because hello is a trigger word to this person because they were once said hello to the father who yelled at them or something. You cannot be responsible for other people's emotions. This is where the left has gone completely off the rails. You can't rubber room or childproof the entire world for people. Just because people take offense to something doesn't mean offense was intended or offered. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't. Now, somebody could mean offense, and in which case we can judge from what they're saying that they said something offensive. You could say that I missed the offense in the poem, and I think they say that later, but that's different than we have to take on all responsibility for every single reaction to every single piece we publish. I am permanently offended by 99% of the stuff the Nation publishes. First of all, I think the poem sucks. I've sent them work. They've never taken anything. All the poems I sent them are better than this poem. It doesn't matter. I'm offended at the fact that they published this poem over my poems. What are they going to do? They're going to take that offense into account? No, because I don't count. I'm not a big enough mob. And that's really what it comes down to. These people are cowards. They are utter, gutless cowards. That's what's driving this. They are so afraid of losing their positions of power that they are absolutely, at their core, they are gutless. They will not stand up to the mob. It doesn't matter how insane the mob is. It doesn't matter how insane their reaction is or how over the top it is. They always acquiesce to the mob because they're fearful, because they're gutless. I absolutely think that the poetry editors of the Nation should step down, but not because of what they published. They should step down because they are utterly gutless human beings who will not defend poetry. It's clear from this 2 little paragraphs that they will not defend the poets that they publish, and they will not defend poetry, and they will not defend free speech. Given that, what the frig are they doing being poetry editors in the first place? Yeah, they should step down, but not for the reason that people are calling for them to step down. Not because they publish something offensive. They should step down because they are offensive, because they're gutless wonders. That's why. That's just the first line. That's the first line of this groveling, idiotic apology. We made a serious mistake by choosing to publish the poem How To. Why? Why? For what reason? Because some people got offended by it? That's the reason you think it's a serious mistake? You're not supposed to publish any poem that offends anybody, ever? Is that really your position? Is that the position of the Nation? That poetry should never offend anybody at any time, ever? That's their position. What the freak good is an art form that never offends anyone, ever? Holy Jesus, are these people? How do these people rise to positions of power within an art is a miracle. It's a miracle of just basically, it has to be some kind of affirmative action driving these people up the food chain, because they just have no intelligence at all. Either no intelligence or even as a gutless apology, this is bad. It's badly worded. It's badly thought out. It's just, oh my God, there's a big mob. They don't like us. We'll just say sorry over and over again and just accept everything. We'll just accept a lot of blame. And let's go to the third line. We are sorry for the pain we have caused to the many communities affected by this poem. Now let me tell you something. This is what's wrong with the left in general. The many communities part. There is no community of pregnant women. There is no community of, I don't know, is there a homeless community? I don't think that there is. They're pretty spread out. They're pretty wide, and and the reasons why they're homeless are very diverse. Is there a community of young people? Is there a community of older people? I guess AARP or something like that. But for the most part, this idea that we are all balkanized, we're all part of groups, and that if the loudest members of that group complain about something, then that they speak for all the people in that group. They speak for every old person and every young person and every homeless person and every pregnant person and every person who has HIV and every person who's a Christian or whatever. They think that a mob of morons who get worked up over a bad poem are in some way indicative of the overall arching. Most people don't care about poetry at all. They don't care. You think people with HIV give a shit about this poem? I mean, really? I mean, if they care, listen, if you got AIDS, you got bigger problems than a freaking poem in the nation, okay? You got much, much bigger problems, okay? For the rest of your life. Don't worry about it. We recognize that we must now earn your trust back. That's a bad sentence. It's a bad. These are the people judging writing. We recognize that we must now earn your trust back. Should we earn back your trust? Always end on the strongest word. If you're a writer out there listening to this, always end on the strongest word. Okay. Yeah, you know what? You're never going to earn back trust with these people. The people who are freaking radical, of people who live by outrage, whose drug is outrage. Those people are never ever going to return to you. Never. They will never return to you. Because you know why? Because they live off the outrage. They need that outrage. And so the next time you do anything, you say anything, in order to earn back the trust, what do you got to do? You got to publish poetry that doesn't ever offend anybody except the approved groups. You can't even come close to offending them. You can't even put anything that's a shadow of a possibility of offending them. Now you're hamstringed. Now it doesn't matter how good a poem is that comes your way. If it might offend these 6 or 7 groups you got in here, it's gone. You want to write a poem, you want to publish a poem that says something about the homeless? Too bad. You can't do it because it might offend somebody. You got to earn back that trust. And what is the trust? The trust is to do whatever the mob tells you to do. This is what happens when you acquiesce, when you quit on the value of free speech, and you quit when you're such a gutless wonder. You get trapped into it's like painting yourself into a corner in a room. You just keep painting and painting and painting until you're standing on one tippy toe in the corner of the room, holding your little freaking can of paint and thinking how you can get your little brush in there so you can get around the corners of the toenail, maybe even paint the toenail. That's what happens to you when you do this kind of garbage. Some of our readers have asked what we were thinking, with good reason, because you clearly don't think. But it's not because you published this poem. I would ask what you were thinking, why you published the poem in the first place. It's not any good. The poem's not any good. I'm defending the guy's right to say whatever he wants to say, but it's not a good poem. It's not a poem I think that deserves any regard. I read the poem and I'm like, I don't really completely get what he's saying. I don't know why he's using the dialect. I don't know why he's why he's dropped every single freaking group that he can think of into this poem, except that maybe it just it's The Nation, so it's a far left publication, and if you drop enough groups in there, maybe they'll publish you, and they did. When we read the poem We took it as a profane, over-the-top attack on the ways in which members of many groups are asked or required to perform the work of marginalization. I don't even know what the hell that means. I mean, basically, they're saying that they took it. First of all, you took it as a profane, over-the-top attack on the ways in which members of many groups are asked or required to perform the work of marginalization. The marginalization of what? Themselves? Listen, if you're homeless, you're not worried about this. You're not worried about that kind of stuff. You're worried about how you're going to eat, where you're going to sleep tonight. I've been homeless. I was homeless 3 times. I don't give a crap about any of this stuff. This is what rich people do when they want to virtue signal. They talk about this kinds of stuff. But for a homeless person, basically they're just trying to get by. They're not required to perform any work of marginalization or anything like that. They go around with their hat out and say, "Please help me," or they just struggle by day to day, or they're crazy a lot of times. They have mental illness, or they or they're just angry, or they're sometimes they're on a run from something. Drug addicts, and they're looking for their next fix. Who knows what it is? But they're not doing this highbrow idea of where they're just like marginalizing themselves by I don't even, again, okay, if that's what you read into the poem, fine. But if that's what, and here's the thing, if that's what you read into the poem, then that's what you read into the poem. Why not come out and defend that? Why not come out and say, this is what we saw in the poem. This is the way we read it. We didn't read it as an attack on, as an ableist attack. We didn't read it as an attack on gay people. We don't think it was an attack on those people. That's why we chose to publish it. Why not defend it like that? Why not say that is what we saw? That was our interpretation. We've read a lot of poetry over the years. We have advanced degrees. We understand how to read, and this is what we read. And if you disagree with that interpretation, fine. Go ahead and have your little hissy fit. But this is the way we saw it, and we stand by not only what we published, but the person who wrote it. Because, that is a person who entrusted us with their poem. We published it, and now we're going to defend him because we're not going to cut and run because we're cowards. Then they say, we can no longer read the poem in that way. Why not? Why not? What changed? What changed? A mob decided to attack you, and so now you can no longer read it the way that you originally read it? And let me tell you something. I don't know if they're right about the marginalization thing, but is it an offensive poem? Not really. It's just kind of a bad poem. It's not offensive. I don't see anything offensive. He's not attacking the homeless. He's not attacking the young. He's not attacking the old. Where is he doing that? And as far as writing in a persona, which is, a race different than his own, I defend absolutely the right to do that. I have pieces like that. I grew up in a black neighborhood. Black people were my friends. Black people were my acquaintances. Black people were my enemies. I know black people. I hung out with black people. Black people were part of my my immediate inner circle for a large portion of my life. And there is absolutely no reason why I cannot write about them. None. None. And there's no reason why they can't write about me. None. Zero. There's nothing to stop that at all. We are currently revising our process for solicited and unsolicited submissions. Now, keep in mind that this particular line really bothers me, because what they're saying now is that you can just forget it if you write something provocative. You can just, and the nation is no longer going to publish it. The nation should just stop publishing poetry at this point. They should just stop, because they're absolutely, completely hamstrung. Certainly, if you're a white man, you can't say anything in the nation anymore. You're done. If you're a white man and a white man poet, and you have a subscription to the nation, cancel it. There is absolutely nothing there for you. Nothing. You can't say anything. All you can do is sit in the corner and listen to how much you suck. That's what you got. That is the left in general now, but it is certainly the case here. You know what they mean when they say revising their process. You know what they mean. It's going to be nothing but women and minority writers saying the same exact thing. That there is an oppressive patriarchy that is beaten down the poor, oppressed other. And that's all you're going to get every time. And okay, if you want to enjoy that, go ahead and enjoy that. But I'm not going to enjoy that. There's nothing there for me. It's not just that I'm a white guy. That's not the only thing. It's just nothing intellectually there for me. I mean, I know how these people think. I know how Randa Jarrar speaks and thinks. There's nothing there. It's not interesting. She's not an interesting thinker. She's a moron. There's nothing at all there going on intellectually. Nothing. It is scraping the very bottom of the barrel intellectually. Let's finish this up. But more importantly, we are listening and we are working. We are grateful for the insightful critiques we have heard. But now the onus of change is on us, and we take that responsibility seriously. Oh, puke me, gag me with a spoon. This is so bad. Oh, we take it. The onus of change is on us. This is like leftist word soup. First of all, they're just stalling. But second of all, this grateful for the insightful critiques. There's been no insightful critiques. I looked and looked and looked. I went to Anders' Twitter page, and I looked at the critiques of his of the things. I looked for other essays that might have been written about this, and I saw nothing. I saw nothing that was insightful. What I saw was a little pissy mob, in the same way you get the little pissy mob, sniping at Donald Trump every time he tweets. There's nothing thoughtful going on there. There's no 3,000 word critique of the poem and why it's shameful or something like that. You don't get that. You're not dealing with intellectuals. These are not intellectuals. These are not people who are intelligent. They just aren't. They're not intelligent in any stinking way. Wow, this has gone on a long time. I'm going to have to break this up into 2 parts. I can see that now. So, if you're listening to this, you probably thought that you're like, what happened to the other one? I'll probably put an end on the other one and tell you there's a second one. But man, good God Almighty, I have a lot to say about this. In the end, this decision means we need to step back and look not only at our editing process, but at ourselves as editors. Well, first of all, okay. Oh my God, that's so groveling. It's so insipid and cowardly. But on top of that, notice how they said editors and not people. Of course, what they mean to say is that they have to look at themselves as people. That there's some kind of deep pathological ableism or racism inside them, and that because they have it manifest within them, they couldn't pull it out enough to see this before they published this poem. And so they need to step back and they need to take account of everything they look at through the prism of this leftism. They have to look at everything and whether it fits in with the idea that the outrage mob will attack them. That's the death of art. That is the death of art right there. You cannot function as an artist or as an editor if you live in this kind of abject fear. You can't do it. You can't. And the bottom line is, if you're really that close to being a racist, if you're that unsure of yourself, I know I'm not a racist. I know I don't look down on people who are crippled. I just did a feature on my deceased friend Michael McNeely, who was missing part of his leg. He was a cripple. I loved Michael. I know I'm not an ableist. I don't look down on people because they're not able to do stuff. I'm a fat guy. Other people in my family who I love are fat. I don't look down on people for being fat. I know it's a hard road to hoe. Believe me, I know it's hard. I don't look down on people with HIV. I don't look down on pregnant people, even young pregnant girls. I just think it's really sad that they've gotten themselves in that kind of spot. I certainly can't feel bad about homeless people. I was homeless 3 times. I don't look down on these people. I do think that sometimes they do things to get themselves into those situations. They make bad decisions and they end up with HIV. They make bad decisions and they end up pregnant. They make bad decisions and they end up homeless. They make bad decisions and they end up crippled. You know, they eat too much and they get fat, and so on. Sometimes, you have a responsibility for what you've done. That's just the way it is. But I don't look down on people. There isn't anybody who doesn't have some kind of cross they're carrying. We all have some kind of cross we're carrying. We're all marginalized in some way. I don't look down on it, so I don't worry. I don't have to look at myself. I can say the truth because I know I'm a good person. Relatively speaking. Nobody's ever as good as they imagine themselves to be, but I know I'm a good person. I know I'm not a racist. I know I don't look at, somebody in a wheelchair and want to mock them or something. I know that a lot of the homeless people are not there by choice or have been put there by circumstances that were not completely in their control. Or even if it was completely in control, they're still human beings and they deserve our compassion if we can muster it. And we should be able to muster it. I know what it's like to be fat and to hold a sandwich in front of yourself and curse yourself for eating it. I know what that pain is like. So, I don't care what anybody says about me. You're not going to fool me into thinking I'm a racist. Somehow, these idiots at the Nation who are in this leftist, ultra compassionate, everything they do is about, oh, please let's help the minority. Somehow, despite all this, they've managed to fool themselves into thinking, because they published a poem that some people don't like, that they need to look at themselves and think, maybe I do hate crippled people. I mean, how poorly do you know yourself if you think that you really need to go back and inspect your own soul for racism? It's just absurd. I want to read his groveling apology too, the author's groveling apology, because Anders Carlson-Wee, and none of these people ever get it. They never get that if you appease the mob does not stop. They just keep coming after you. The only way the mob stops coming after you is if they see a juicier treat somewhere to the left or right of you. Otherwise, they're just going to gnaw on you until there's nothing left but bone, and maybe beyond the point where there's bone. So, after a couple of weeks, he wrote, "To all who have voiced questions and concerns about my poem in the Nation, I am listening closely and I am reflecting deeply. I am sorry for the pain I have caused, and I take responsibility for that. I intended for this poem to address the invisibility of homelessness, and clearly it doesn't work. Treading anywhere close to blackface is horrifying to me, and I am profoundly regretful. The fact that I did not foresee this reading of the poem and the harm it could cause is humbling and eye-opening. I am beginning a process of talking to people and reevaluating what it means to make art in this world from a place of privilege and the responsibility and accountability that comes with it. As someone suggested, I will be donating my publication honorarium to downtown congregations to end homelessness. I am grateful to all of you, for your voicing your thoughts and feelings, and I will be thinking hard about this for a long, long time. I continue to listen." Unbelievable. Again, this guy wrote the poem. He knows what he intended when he wrote the poem. He knows if he intended something. You can only... when you look at an apology like this, you have to say, maybe he did mean it as a racist thing. Maybe he is a racist. That's the only thing you can get out of it. Because he's not defending himself from it. He's saying, well, what do you know? I guess I am a racist. So maybe he is. I mean, there's the only way that you can read it. Because I would never take this tack. I would never say, well, you know what? Now that you mention it, yeah, I guess I am a racist. I'm not a racist. I know I'm not a racist. Nothing I write is racist. Nothing I write promotes racism. Nothing I write is intended to promote racism. And that would be my answer, and my final answer. And there's no way you can confuse me on the fact, because I know who I am. The idea that he invokes blackface himself, that he accepts the idea that he is doing blackface, is itself an indictment. But I don't really think this is the case. I think that this is just a coward. He's just as much a coward as the editors. He's just so afraid of standing up for himself that he will even admit, he will grovel and say the worst things about himself in the hopes of defending themselves. It's kind of like a, an animal who's being chased by a wolf or something, and he rolls on his belly and he offers up his throat and says, "Here, take it. Just take a little bite of me and maybe let me go away wounded and I can die in a corner or something." This is what this is like. And because if he really did write it as a racist poem, that he doesn't need to donate. I don't know what the nation pays, maybe $50, $100. I don't know what they pay for a poem. It's not a lot. You never get a lot of money for a poem. But if that's your attrition, if that's your contrition, that you're going to your penance, you're going to throw a little, $50 or whatever to the downtown congregation to end homelessness. I mean, it's just not a lot, but it's, well, you know what? A guy like that, he doesn't really even deserve me defending him. But I will defend him because I'm defending free speech. I'm defending the idea that what you say should be taken in the intention that you wish to take it. You wished it to be meant. You should never be held accountable for something that somebody else decides you meant. Because they can decide you meant anything, ever, for everything. I don't really care what people say about my work. I really don't. I mean, I like when they like it. I wish that more people like my stuff. But I don't. But if somebody came along and told me that I was a racist writer, I would laugh in their faces. I would laugh in their face. It's absurd. The charge is absurd. It's idiotic. It's not true. So all of that brings me to this rotund professor at Fresno State. And her name is Randa Jarrar. And she's gotten somewhat famous, at least in conservative circles, because she said that she wanted she thought that Barbara Bush was a horrible person. And when Barbara Bush had died, or was on the verge of dying, and when she died, she celebrated that. She celebrated that and called her, the mother of warmongers or whatever, and horrible human being. And so she'd already gotten kind of famous for, celebrating the death of former First Lady Barbara Bush, which, I just thought was stupid. It was impolite. It was inconsiderate. But, that's the way they are. They don't, if you don't agree with them on anything, if you've ever disagreed with them, then you don't get any quarter with these people, and you never have. But this is a lot more troubling, this tweet. And remember, this is a professor. This is somebody who teaches young people. And what she says is not special to her. A lot of other people, a lot of other professors in this country agree with her and think in the same way as she does. Not all of them. Not all of them. Never think it's all of them. There are many, many great professors in our country. But a lot of them, a good portion of those are cowards. They don't want to lose their positions at the university either. So they're afraid to do what I'm doing here, which is, defend free speech. See, these people can't hurt me. I don't have anything they can take away from me. I mean, they could try to take away my job, but then, it would just be my wife doing the dishes, so it doesn't bother me any. It's not going to hurt me any. I've set up my life so that these people can never, ever get anything from me. Ever. There's nothing they can do to hurt me. I can be completely honest in my writing, in my commentary, in my essays, in my poetry, in my prose, in my fiction. I can say whatever I want to say, whenever I want to say it. This allows me to be the very best writer I can be. And in some ways, it allows me to be one of the best writers going. Because a lot of other people have to defend themselves by being, circumspect about how this mob of outrage leftists is going to attack them. But I don't have that problem. I've set it up so that I don't even care. I don't even care if the writing is successful at this point. I don't care. I mean, I still have my goals. I still have things that I'm looking forward to. I'm still trying to get through. But in the end, I just don't care. It doesn't matter. There is nothing so important to me as my artistic integrity. Nothing at all. Nothing else drives me. So let me read, what this woman said. And she's a charmer. She's wonderful. She said, "At some point, all of us in the literary community must demand that white editors resign. It's time to step down and hand over the positions of power. We don't have to wait for them to fuck up. The fact that they hold these positions is fucked up enough." So, this is what this... Now, just imagine what she's saying here. She's saying if you are white, you are by nature guilty. You're by nature guilty. Just by being white. You can't hold a position. See, she's taking what happened at the Nation, which was idiotic to begin with. She looked at those groveling apologies, and she said, and she's not only called for their firing, but she called for the firing of every single white editor in the country. Now, I know some white editors. I'm friends with white editors. Some of these people are extremely talented at what they do. They are wonderful individuals. And even when I disagree with their politics, I still think they're wonderful individuals. Michael Hathaway has been publishing me for almost 30 years. We disagree constantly on politics and just about everything. And yet I think he's a great guy. He's got too many cats, but he's a great guy. Terrific guy. He's brought up his book, his journal, Chiron Review, from a very small journal to where it's now a respectable, publication that runs. It's a glossy and it looks nice and it's just a terrific journal. And he's built that over the years. And all of a sudden, this guy is supposed to just hand over he's by the way, I believe he's a gay guy too. So he's this gay man of starting to be advancing years should hand over his journal somehow that he's built from nothing over 30 years of his life just because he's white. That's absurd. It's idiotic. This is as stupid and as evil as when in Germany they hung up "No Jews Allowed" signs. Isn't it basically the same thing? Isn't it basically the same thing as that? And yet this is a professor at a university in a college in California, the shining jewel of America. Think about that. Think about that. And that she not only has she not gotten in trouble for this, but she's not even been reprimanded for it. That I know of, she's not been given any kind of, censor from the university or anything. You are allowed to be a flat-out racist now against white people. That's the message here. You're allowed to actually talk the language of elimination and genocide against white people. We've seen it in the New York Times when they just hired somebody who openly tweeted out things about, cancel white people and things of that sort. I love attacking old white men. You're allowed to do this now. And the biggest and even beyond the idea that this is the real racism. Even beyond that, even beyond the obvious problems with that, when it comes to the art, of the poetry, first of all, why in hell would I stay in it? I'm having real issues with this. Why should I remain a poet, even though I'm really good at it? Why should I remain a poet and put my efforts in this field that is clearly being overrun by these idiots? Why should I do it? And what kind of poetry is going to exist going forward? In this world, the writers like Robert Frost or W.H. Auden or T.S. Eliot, Charles Bukowski, Raymond Carver, Billy Collins, they would find no audience because they would say, oh, these people are entitled. They're white men, and it's just white men doing for white things, and they shouldn't even be in the literary world because they're white, and they need to hand over the reins of power. So this is really when she talks about positions of power, you begin to see that this has nothing to do with compassion. I've talked about this before. If you go back and listen to my talk on compassion, you will see that I told you that this is not about compassion. They don't feel compassion for black people. They don't feel compassion for the homeless. They don't feel compassion for the disabled. Normal people do. Normal people care about those people. Normal people can, see a fat person and they can care about them on that level. Not as many as should be, probably, but they do. But these people, they don't care. What this is all about is a power play. It's always been about a power play. It's always been about getting as much power as they possibly can so that they can become as wealthy and as powerful as possible within the academic and media and the arts, to include Hollywood and the culture in general. This is just a power play. It's nothing to do. It's total Nietzschean. It's total will to power. It has nothing at all to do with how much they care about other people. That's a facade. That's the shell upon which they build a shell around their own little ego trips and their own little power trips. That's all it is, and that's all it ever was. When I, told Anders Carlson-Wee that he should grow a pair and stand up for what he really meant, I was attacked by a woman, and I won't give her name here, but it was on Twitter. I was attacked as saying, ha ha ha, here's another entitled white guy. And it turns out that this woman, she had published 3 poems in her life, about 3 poems that I know of. She published 3 poems. She has already got a Patreon account in which she's asking people for money so that she can have more time to write. Now, I never asked anybody for anything. Even when I was homeless, I didn't ask people for money. I didn't ask the public for money. I never went to the public and said, please support me so that I can hang out and be homeless and and write my poems in my busted down car. I didn't do that. So she said that. She said to, that I was entitled. Now, I spent 30 years, a good portion of those years being really starving for my art, literally starving for my art. I'm not even kidding when I say starving for my art. I went days without eating. Okay. I went 2 weeks where I ate nothing but like a little Debbie cake a day. Like I was getting like 400 calories a day. My face was so gaunt. It looked like I was like, I'd just come out of a desert or something walking through it. I sometimes wish I was that poor again. I'd lose a lot of weight. The good old days. But, I never felt I was entitled to anything. I felt I had to work for everything. I felt like I had to work to become great at my art. And these people don't feel that way at all. They don't feel like they should have to struggle like I did to get anywhere in the world. They feel like it should just be given to them because it was just given to me. But they're wrong. Nothing in life is ever given to anybody. Sometimes it's a little easier, sometimes it's a little harder, but unless you're really, really, born a billionaire, and very few of us are, but unless you're born to that kind of wealth, you worked for it. You worked for it. Nobody becomes a surgeon just because they were born a surgeon. You got to work for it. Whether you're white, black, Latino, Asian, doesn't matter. You got to work for it. You see somebody who's a doctor, that person busted their ass to be a doctor. You should shake their hand and thank them like you would a soldier or something, because they're saving lives all the time because they busted ass. And if they make a lot more money than me, then God bless them. Good for them. I won't talk about their privilege. Just like I didn't talk about my privilege when I was out hanging out with friends and they were studying their asses off. This is just garbage. The whole thing is garbage. The whole thing is a lie. And they are destroying this beautiful art. As I said earlier, this art is dying. We are seeing the death of an art form. And it isn't because the art itself is dying. It's dying because its practitioners, the true practitioners of the art, are being strangled out by these political morons who don't care about the art and who only want to use it to gain and maintain power. And if we allow it to go on, if we don't stop it from happening, if we don't speak up against it, if we snivel and grovel and say, oh, we're so sorry, please, please just turn the eyesore on somebody else and not me, and let me have my 60 chapbooks, my 60-page chapbooks this year that I can sell 40 copies of. Oh please, just let me publish one more poem in a named journal. If you do that, well, first of all, I've got no respect for you. But second of all, you've got no respect for the art. Because the art deserves to be defended. It deserves to be defended against these third-rate outrage pimps. And it deserves to be defended against these editors who publish dreck because there's a name attached to it, or just because they want to hit some quota. We need the arts to be based on merit, to be based on stuff that blows people away, because that's the only thing that's going to make art great again. We talk about making America great again. I would like to make art great again. And it can be great again. Because there's nothing... I used to say this about baseball. I guess I'll close with this. I used to say this about baseball. There was nothing about baseball... There was nothing about baseball that couldn't fix baseball. And Clinton said that about America. There's nothing wrong with America that couldn't be fixed with what's right about America. And I say the same thing about baseball when they had... when McGuire and Sosa were hitting all those home runs because they were all juiced up. I said, they didn't need them. Baseball would have fixed itself. They often said that Sosa and McGuire saved baseball and brought it back from the brink. No, they didn't. Baseball's fine. Baseball's a wonderful sport. It's enjoyable. It's a lot of fun. All they did was enrich and empower themselves and give themselves more power and cheat by juicing up. That's it. And you were thrilled by it for a while, but in the end, it was bad for baseball. It was the worst. It was far worse than the strike was for baseball, the steroids problem. Far worse. Because it made everything seem cheap and tawdry. And the same thing goes for the art of poetry. Poetry doesn't need, to bring in new voices. If those voices are vital, if they're good, they will make themselves known. They always will. They always have. Langston Hughes and Gwendolyn Brooks, they didn't need affirmative action for their poetry. They didn't need to squeeze out white men so that they could be heard. Their poetry did that because they were geniuses. And the same is true for everybody else. If you're great, you will get heard unless you're suppressed. And that's the worst thing we could possibly do in any art, is suppress greatness. Because then all you're left with is mediocrity and bad feelings. Anyway, this is James Valvis talking about this stuff, and I hope you'll like, comment, subscribe, even share this. I don't care who hears it. I don't care if it costs me publications. It might, and I don't care. Somebody's got to stand up. Someone's got to say the right thing, and I'm willing to do that. So go forth and share this if you want, or don't share it. But if you don't share it, if you don't speak up against this stuff, well, then you should know who you are. You should know who you are. If you're afraid because it's going to hurt your career, or it's going to hurt your poetry standing in the world, if you know this, whatever everything I said is true, and yet you shy away from it, or even shy away from publishing me because I've become persona non grata, if you do that, well, that's who you are. Own it. At least own it to yourself. But, as I said, please like, comment, subscribe, share this, and as always, regardless, thank you for listening, and God bless.